The Kidnapped Bride. This is a love story that was written in English and translated into Arabic by Dr. A. Ahmed. Copyright. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author except by a reviewer who may quote brief passages in a review for printing in a newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. All the characters in this book are fictitious and any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is merely coincidental. Chapter 8. In a hut of the good old African man. The Dinka groom Malwal has arrived in Kenya 3 months after the sad day he expected to meet his beloved bride, Ayan, at the international airport in the United States of America. He landed at Nairobi International Airport one morning with a still bleeding heart, a confused mind, and a troubled conscience. When he arrived in Kenya, he had less than a couple of $100 in his pocket. He obtained the address of a Sudanese family living in Nairobi so they could house him for a day or two before he resumed his perilous journey to the Sudanese border. However, the miserable condition of the family convinced him to leave the next day. From Nairobi, Malwal traveled by truck to the Sudanese border. The closest town he can get to in Sudan is Naris. He spent his second night sleeping outdoors. He found a small, deserted hut and slept nearby. He was very exhausted and tired that night. When he woke up in the morning, he found his bag, wallet, and watch stolen. As a result, he became penniless on the 3rd day after arriving in Africa. For a healthy young man his age, begging is shameful. He just decided to continue his journey on foot until he reached Naris. Very few people walk into the forest. There's a possibility that wild beasts will attack him and eat him alive. Nor did this danger prevent Malwal from continuing his advance towards Sudan. His knowledge of this part of his motherland is little. He lived most of his time in the southwestern part of Sudan. So, he walked all day and did not rest for a long time. He was told that if he kept going quickly on foot, he would reach the first town in Sudan before sunset and darkness. Towards evening, Malwal entered the town of Naris, dragging his exhausted body. He is very thirsty and starving. An old man saw him and greeted him. Peace be upon you, Banjas. Malwal doesn't like the religiously laden greeting or the fact that he was greeted with a bang like a little kid. However, his parents always told him to respect the old man, even if he worshipped Satan. Malwal replied, Peace be upon you, grandfather. Where did you come from and where are you going? Oh, Banjas. His young guest was waiting for his answer. The old man stared at him with his eyebrows furrowed. Malwal spoke calmly, I am already a married man, grandfather. I came to South Sudan to search for my lost bride. The old man scratched his gray beard, revealing 2 missing front teeth. How's the bride lost if she doesn't run away with another man? It never occurred to Malwal that his missing bride, Ayan, might have eloped with another man. He had never asked himself whether she really loved him or not. Does she actually have another lover but her parents forced her to marry him? Before Malwal could remove his doubts, the old man spoke again. My 2 young wives recently left me and went to the refugee camp in Nairobi. I heard that they met 2 other young men at the camp and had sex with them. The latest news I heard about them is that they married these 2 men and they all immigrated to the country of the Kawaja in America. The old man shrugged his thin shoulders and hung his head in sadness at the loss of his 2 wives. Have you divorced them already, grandfather? Malwal could barely contain his curiosity. Once again, the old man raised and lowered his shoulders, breathing deeply. Not yet, my son, but what will the word divorce do for my mouth? Malwal frowned and said, What they did is wrong. The old man smiled and patted Malwal on the shoulder. A woman's heart does not know right and wrong. Only the fear of being beaten by the father or husband makes a woman do what is right and not wrong. Malwal shook his head, feeling the color rising to his face. Women are human beings, grandfather. They do right and wrong like men. The old man smiled and raised his thin eyebrows. You're still a little kid, my boy. You have no experience with women yet. Even the Holy Quran warns us against the deception of women because their deception is great. Malwal wanted to argue further, but he thought the old man was crazy. Why does he believe that every human being on the face of the earth is a Muslim like him and believes in his Quran and the Islamic religion? Instead, he asked, "You haven't told me yet, Grandpa, how far is Kobita City from here?" The old man shook his head. His eyes widened. "Why do you want to go to Kopita?" "I am looking for a way to reach Bahr el Ghazal province." Shaking his head, Grandpa spoke slowly. "Bahr el Ghazal? Why did you go to Kenya then? You will be killed before you reach Juba City." Malwal nodded and said resolutely, "I have to go there no matter what happens to me." The old man pushed himself up, leaning on his gnarled wooden staff. "But you took the wrong path. You should have come through Uganda or Ethiopia." Then he waved the stick in the air. "From there a UN helicopter could take you to Bahr el Ghazal. I heard that the Red Cross and UN staff are helping people fly for free in their helicopters to Bahr el Ghazal province." Malwal is very tired. He rubbed his eyes before answering. "I had no choice, grandfather. Someone in America gave me the address of his relatives in Kenya. I don't know anyone in Uganda and Ethiopia." The old man leaned close to Malwal, hot breath blowing across his face. "Go to Kobita City and try to find those NGOs to help you get to Bahr el Ghazal." Malwal looked around, putting one hand on his forehead to protect his eyes from the setting sun. "How far is Kobita City?" Grandpa showed his toothless smile. "A day if you run like a deer and a week if you walk like an old elephant like me." Malwal thought for a moment and said, "One day if I walk fast?" Grandpa pursed his lips with his finger to the side of his mouth. "Maybe 2, but it shouldn't take more than that for a young guy like you." "Grandpa," Malwal said in a voice that sounded like someone who might die at any moment if he didn't get immediate help. "I have no money or shelter. I've been walking all day and need to rest the night before I resume walking tomorrow." The old man opened his arms, almost falling off his balance. "Then come to my hut and keep me company all night. You're young and strong, and you can fight a lion or a thief if they come to attack me while I am asleep." After saying those words, the old man took a handful of snuff and threw it into his toothless mouth. He tried to laugh but couldn't, his mouth was too full of the snuff. Chapter 9. The Fall of the City of Kobita. That night, the groom, Malwal, slept like a dead man. The good old man continued talking to himself for an hour, thinking that his guest was still awake and listening to him. Since he had brought his guest to his debilitated hut, the old man had talked about one subject. Malwal must accept his advice to return to Kenya and fly back to America. With heavy eyes, the sad groom rejected the advice and fell asleep. The old man went on to explain why his guest should not risk his life and go to the city of Kobita. If the groom, Malwal, had stayed awake for half an hour and heard the horrific stories told by the old man, he would have abandoned his plan to find his lost bride, Ayan, and return safely to America. The next morning, the kind old man had difficulty waking Malwal from sleep, but it was the guest who asked his host to wake him before sunrise. Before he left that morning, Malwal had breakfast with the generous old man. Then the good southern gentleman packed up some water and a little food and gave them to his guest. Fortunately, the heavy rainy season ended a few weeks before Malwal arrived in Sudan. By then, the highway into the forest had dried out, making walking less difficult. Malwal walked as fast as he could and rested only briefly. He is in a hurry to reach Kopita City before sunset. On the way, he met an old woman with her daughter and her daughter's 3 children, and she told him that they had been walking for 2 days since they left the city. This news terrified the sad groom and made him hurry. If he had known what awaited him in Kobita City, he might not have been in such a rush to get there. The tragedy occurred just 3 hours before his arrival. Once he reached the outskirts of the city, he was arrested by a government patrol truck and taken away as a prisoner of war. He became a prisoner accused of spying for the Sudan People's Liberation Army. Malwal demanded his release on the grounds that he was an American citizen, but the Arab soldiers beat his face and kicked him with their heavy military boots. Then they threw his semi-conscious body like a sack of grain into their military truck and headed for the city. With his hands and feet tied with ropes, Malwal landed hard on the bed of the truck. As the car sped, his face kept bouncing off the bed of the truck like a football. He constantly begged the soldiers to help him, but they mocked and cursed him instead. Arab soldiers hate spies more than actual Southern rebels. Whenever they catch a boy or girl they accuse of spying, they will beat them so they can extract some information from them. Once they are satisfied with interrogating their victims, they will kill them. Because this execution violated the Geneva Convention, the soldiers invented a way to dispose of the dead bodies. There is an old stinking lake near their military base. This lake is used as a burial place for the victims. The citizens of Kopita call it Skeleton Lake. The soldiers would open their victim's stomach and throw his body into the dirty water. To date, no man or woman, young or old, who has been arrested has escaped such a tragic end if accused of espionage. Of course, Christian girls will be raped without marriage on the basis of Islam's teachings about the infidel Christian women or captive female prisoners of war of jihad for the sake of God to spread the Islamic religion in South Sudan. Malwal was one of 6 Southerners arrested that day and taken in for questioning. When he was taken from the truck and thrown into a small room, the American groom found some detainees there. They are all bound with strong ropes. They are bleeding profusely from head to toe. Some of them had their faces so disfigured by brutal torture that the American boy could not tell whether they were male or female. Likewise, he was dragged like an animal and tied to a wooden pole. The soldiers left the room as soon as they were sure he was securely restrained. When they disappeared, Malwal tried to talk to the other detainees. Either they became deaf and mute due to torture, or they were afraid to talk to him and reveal some of their secrets for fear that he would be a spy spying on them for the benefit of the Arabs. For a week before Malwal's arrest, government soldiers and Southern rebels had been constantly fighting for control of the city. The city of Kopita has become like a piece of bone that 2 mad dogs are fighting over. There are heavy casualties on both sides. For 7 nights the rebels attacked the city. Each time they attacked, they were able to penetrate civilian areas, obtain food supplies, and forcefully recruit new rebels. The government soldiers refrained from shooting at them until they left the city early in the morning. The soldiers then emerged from their hiding places, chased them for several kilometers, and returned to their base. This game of seek and find between a cat and a mouse lasted for 7 nights before the American groom who had come to Africa to search for his missing bride was captured. On that day, a few hours after Malwal's arrest, the attack resumed. The rebels came a few hours earlier than usual. The whole city is dark. Every light was turned off by an official army order. Military sirens are constantly ringing. Heavy artillery rained down on the city. The rebels were determined that night, regardless of the extent of the losses, they must be forced by any means to capture the city. The attack focused on the military base where Malwal was detained. His ears were deafened by the constant sound of bombing. The missiles lit up the small room like a flash of lightning. Malwal concluded that his end had come. After 2 hours, the missiles stopped, but the sounds of machine guns were still heard. He heard the soldiers shouting words of encouragement to each other. Their screams indicated to him that the rebels were remarkably close. One of the Muslim soldiers chanted in Arabic, "O martyrs, strive and thank God for obtaining martyrdom and winning paradise." Another soldier replied, "God is great." Another soldier shouted, "Death is right and life is wrong. When the victory of Allah comes, no one can defeat us. God sent his angels to fight with us and defeat the unclean Christian infidels." These religious words of encouragement did not last long. Malwal began to hear the footsteps of the Arab soldiers fleeing. He expected that some fleeing Muslim soldiers would enter the room and shoot them. Then the captive American groom saw a black figure rushing into the room like a black ghost. The person turned on a battery flashlight and focused it on his face. Malwal closed his eyes and waited for the bullets to reach his body. Instead, he felt his hands and legs being released and heard a voice shouting at him in broken Arabic, "Take this Kalashnikov and fight." Malwal identified the speaker as a Southerner like himself. He took the gun and waited for further orders. "Our forces have already captured the city. We still need to clean the city of the cowardly Arabs. Kill any enemy Muslim person who comes your way." Even those southern Christian traders who fight with the Arabs should be killed. Malwal ran after the rebellious southerner who had saved his life and joined the battle against his wishes. Chapter 10. A sex scandal in the home of the Imam of the Grand Mosque. A year has passed since the Christian girl Ikhlas appeared in a house in front of the mosque, and the neighbors saw her. No one saw the man who brought her there. People knew that she was serving Maulana's wife as a servant. However, Imam Mubarak's family does not pay her a wage for her service and treats her as a slave. At first, she was wearing normal clothes, but then people started seeing her wearing the Islamic abaya and hijab like a Muslim girl. The neighbors concluded that Maulana and his wife had converted her to Islam. This is seen as the honorable Imam and his blessed wife genuinely caring for the girl's soul. What disturbed the neighbors was the fact that the holy Imam kept the beautiful girl in his house without marrying her to anyone before Satan intervened and caused her to fall into the sin of adultery. When Ikhlas came to the Imam's house, the neighbors called her the girl in the Maulana's house. This name was slowly changed, and she became the Imam's daughter. Everyone knew that Maulana's 4 daughters were married and had moved to their husbands' homes. The first daughter married a lawyer, the second married a doctor, the third married a wealthy merchant, and the fourth was favored by God so much that she married a member of the House of Representatives or Parliament in Khartoum. Among his other 3 wives, the blessed Imam has daughters who are married to nobles in society. But then a great scandal occurred and the holy residence of Imam al-Salih in the city was desecrated. The rumor of the illegitimate pregnancy of Imam Mubarak's daughter began when a neighbor visited Maulana's house late one evening and saw her in her nightgown. It seemed to the visitor that Ikhlas was probably 4 or 5 months pregnant. The lady couldn't believe her eyes until she took the maid aside and inquired about her big stomach. When she confirmed the fidelity of the pregnancy, the lady left the Imam's house as if she had discovered that a member of the Holy Family was afflicted with an incurable contagious disease, such as the plague or the coronavirus. She did not even consult the Imam's honorable wife about her astonishing discovery of the scandal. Then she visited 101 houses and spread gossip. Every woman who heard the gossip visited 50 other homes and reported the disturbing news. Like wildfire, the shocking news spread throughout the city at the speed of sound. In less than a week, almost every citizen in the city of El Fasher and the suburbs of the large city learned that the daughter of Maulana Abdul Razak, the Imam of the largest mosque, had become pregnant with an illegitimate child without a husband. Some women are so busy reporting the news that they haven't cooked or cleaned their homes for a week. Although their dirty clothes piled up in piles, this did not hinder their missions. Fathering their daughters for the first time, husbands allowed such freedom to their wives. Men also walk around and meet in groups on the roads and alleys and discuss the scandal that occurred in a house in front of the great mosque. The sex scandal spread at the speed of light, even faster than the fire that destroyed the city of Gadaref in 1955 in eastern Sudan, which was ignited by a girl in front of the Grand Mosque. Rumors said at the time that Maulana's daughter in the city of Gadaref, who was born from his blood, committed suicide by burning her body when she became pregnant with a forbidden child. And no one knew who conceived her without the sanctity of permissible Islamic marriage. Only God knows the truth of these rumors. But the neighbors in the city of El Fasher had no difficulty finding out who had gotten the girl pregnant. The perpetrator's words exposed him to his heinous crime and thus condemned him. More than a dozen men are ready to swear on the Holy Quran in the Sharia court that they heard Sharif ibn Sheikh Talha when he said that he would commit adultery with the beautiful and sexy girl and impregnate her with his child before the rains of the following fall season. It has been exactly 6 months since the Arab boy made that obscene vow. When the woman who made the great discovery, who was called Sit al-Banat, was questioned about the girl being sincere, she said with the bone of her tongue that she was in her 6th month of pregnancy. Everyone put the blame on our honorable Lord. Sharif tried to enter through the front door, but the blessed Imam closed it in his face. The lover, Al-Wulhin Sharif, had 2 options, either to kidnap the girl and run away with her because she was his lover, something a good Arab boy like him would not do, or to make her pregnant with a forbidden or wad haram child. Now the main concern of the people is what Maulana will do. He will not be able to kill the girl because she has a great responsibility and trust hanging around his neck. He would not be able to keep her in his sacred abode until she gave birth to the illegitimate child. The only option remaining for the blessed Imam is to force Sharif bin Sheikh Talha to marry the pregnant girl whose body he defiled with his adultery without a permissible Islamic marriage. But no Arab boy in the city of Al-Fashir would ever marry a girl who became pregnant before marriage. She has now become like a prostitute and has a forbidden love interest or an adulterous child in her defiled womb. No one can live with a prostitute and raise an illegitimate child in a Muslim society. Moreover, the adulterous boy and adulterous girl must be flogged with 100 lashes each by the Sharia court in a public place, and a group of believers must witness their torment, according to the commandment of the Holy Quran. Chapter 11. Heavenly Abibil Birds. A month, a week, and 1 day have passed since the woman called Sit al-Banat revealed the scandal of Wad al-Haram's presence in the house of the Imam of the Grand Mosque in the city of Al-Fashir in western Sudan. Each woman used a chart as a table to count the days. Some women used black charcoal as a marker to record the days in their timetables, while others asked their children, boys, and girls to steal chalk from their schools. Every woman wished that our honorable Lord and his honorable wife would not discover the pregnancy until the child was born. For this reason, many of them included in their 5 daily prayers a request to God to blind the eyes of the Blessed Family. Some of them asked for the divine promise in the throne verse in Surah Al-Baqarah that God would build a dam or a wall behind and in front of our Lord and his wife's eyes and blind them from the view of the sacred lamb until she delivered her haram baby. Other women who were less desirous of evil called on the holy names of some of the righteous saints of God who had died years ago. If our Lord and his wife found out about the forbidden pregnancy, they would not throw the girl away from their now defiled holy home or slay her in an honor killing, but rather keep her until the child sees the forensic daylight. However, men have different attitudes and expectations. They wanted to find someone who was bold enough and feared no one but God, whom they could send to the eminent Imam, Maulana Abdul Razak. But not a single person is ready to convey such ugly news to his religious leader. After much discussion and consultation, the men reached a collective agreement. They learned that Maulana's son-in-law, a representative in the General Parliament in Khartoum City, was coming to Al-Fashir city soon. They decide to confront him with the scandal and ask him to discuss it with his father-in-law. On the same day that the representative arrived from the capital city, some pious men visited him and, in a sad and polite manner, expressed this shameful conception to him. The son-in-law was so upset that he decided to approach his father-in-law on the same day and confront him with the ugly news. Like Omar bin al-Khattab, when he heard that his sister had converted to Islam, the son-in-law rushed out of his house in a state of anger and headed to his father-in-law. This man had won the elections and secured a seat in parliament because of Maulana's speeches and reputation. Therefore, the scandal of the father of his wife may jeopardize his political career, and he may be expelled from his honorable position and not win any future elections. To avoid such a disastrous stigma, the MP decided to give Maulana 2 options rather than a third. Either he expels the pregnant girl with the forbidden baby from his house and thus leaves her and her illegitimate child to go to hell, or he forces Sharif, the son of Sheikh Talha, to marry her within 24 hours. He is determined not to give way to any argument, withdrawal, or change in these 2 options. To prove to his father-in-law that he was serious and firm in his decision, the deputy took 6 men with him as witnesses. Before leaving his house to head to Dar al-Arkam, the angry politician tied his long dagger, which resembled the Shotal al-Handawi of the Fuzzy-Wuzzy people of eastern Sudan, to his left shoulder and carried his large stick, which weighed 25 pounds, in his right hand. With this heavy and large stick, which was like the staff of the prophet Moses, peace be upon him, he could divide the Red Sea and kill the great dragon if they tried to block his way. If he had a double-edged sword, he would have taken it. The other 6 male witnesses must run to keep up with his pace. Al-Sab is the name given to the member of parliament from the day he was born. Sometimes, some lucky people got names that turned out to suit their personalities for better or worse as they grew up. Mr. Difficult has such a lucky name. He is a perfect example of the meaning of his name Al-Sab, a tough, rough, serious, sharp man, always angry, looking for trouble and fighting wherever he goes. His presence caused fear and his absence created terror in the souls of those who hated him. When he walked quickly, and when he spoke he made people listen, and when he struck, his blow caused severe pain, and sometimes his punch was fatal, like an angry wrestler. Maulana Abdul Razak had all the qualities of his son-in-law and excelled in education. Imam Al-Fadil graduated from Al-Azhar University in Cairo City, Egypt. This prestigious institute of Islamic learning has recently become known for producing Muslim terrorist leaders. Imam Abdul Razak spent a third of his life in this great Islamic center of learning before returning to Sudan to become the great imam of the largest mosque in the city of El Fasher in the Darfur region. Maulana claimed to have the same amount of knowledge as the great defender of the Islamic religion, Abu Hamid al-Ghazali of his time, who was known as Hujjat al-Islam. However, it would be unfair to call Maulana Sheikh Abdul Razak anything less than a scholar of the 21st century after the Pakistani scholar Abu Ala Maududi, who holds the honor of the greatest Muslim scholar of the 20th century. Abu Ala Maududi is considered the father of all modern Islamic terrorist groups because he declared all the peaceful Muslims of his contemporaries to be infidels because they abandoned the absent Islamic duty of jihad for the sake of God to spread the Islamic religion with violence, just as the messenger of Allah Muhammad and his mujahideen companions did, who spread Islam by the point of the sword among the Christian infidels, the brothers of apes and pigs the Jews, and the cursed Hindu polytheists. They reached Spain in the west and India in the east. No one will deny his claim if the Imam, the scholar Sheikh Abdul Razak, says that he is more knowledgeable about the laws of Islamic Sharia, its philosophy, and theology than the Egyptian scholar Sheikh Metwali al-Sahrawi or Taha Hussein. The honorable Imam of the largest mosque in the city of El Fasher is a huge man with a body like the Palestinian giant Goliath, who was killed by the Jewish shepherd, the little Hebrew boy David. Mevlana is tall and has a head larger than the rest of his body. This large head is always covered with a white turban and attached to the longest beard a Muslim man can ever grow. It seemed that his long beard surpassed that of the Prophet Muhammad in terms of length and density. His eyes are large and red, and his flat nose covers half of his face. He always carries a long rosary to pray most of the time. He is like his son-in-law in that he never goes outside his bounds without carrying a thick stick in his hand and a sharp dagger fastened to his left shoulder. No one ever saw Maulana without a big turban on his head except his wives. On that day for the first time, people could see his bald head without a turban. Mevlana's head without a hood resembles a delaba. One may want to know what this pinworm is. I was born and raised in Sudan, spent a third of my life in India, visited Egypt and Lebanon, and now live in the West, but I have never seen delaba in any of those countries except in my own country. I doubt whether God actually designed or created this kind of large fruit. I also doubt that this huge fruit exists in any country other than Sudan. If the story of the Ababil birds mentioned in the Holy Quran is true, then these heavenly birds used these fruits as stones to destroy the forces of Abraha, king of Ethiopia. I believe that Allahu Akbar was so annoyed with Abraha and his great elephant named Mahmud that he showed his divine vengeance on them in a way that will be remembered forever and ever. It is most likely that God commanded his heavenly birds to pick fruits from the bitter tree of hell called Al-Zakum, and to stone the invading Abyssinian army that came to destroy the Black Kaaba, which is the house of God in the city of Mecca. Unfortunately, some Zakum fruits accidentally fell into Sudan and grew as delib trees. If you want to curse someone in Sudan, tell him that his head looks like a delaba fruit. If he doesn't kill you, he will never talk to you again. The racist Sudanese Arabs call the delaba fruits the mangoes of slaves, and they mean the black Africans from Darfur, the Nuba Mountains, and South Sudan. Therefore, when Maulana's bald head appeared at his door that day, he looked like the delaba or a mango of black slave Negroes. After the relatives exchanged some obligatory Islamic religious greetings, such as peace, mercy, and blessings of God Almighty upon you, Mr. Al-Sab revealed to his father-in-law the purpose of his visit. Your daughter Ruqayya Abdul Razak will be divorced, and she will be forbidden as a wife forever to me, just like my mother, if you do not expel the infidel Dinka girl from your house or force the man who impregnated her in a haram sex to marry her immediately. Maulana's eyes scanned the faces of the other 6 witnesses, and he understood that his angry son-in-law was serious in his threat and demand. The expression on the Imam's face showed that he was in serious trouble. His incredibly angry son-in-law put him in a corner from which he could only get out with a sacrifice. Mr. Saab raised his voice and made his demand again. There is a moment of silence so terrible one could hear a pin drop. Then Maulana spoke in a deep voice, his eyes turned downward. No man has slept with the Dinka girly class and made her pregnant with a child except me. The hard master stared at our Lord, his mouth wide open and his eyes bulged out of their holes, and then he shouted, "But you have 4 wives already in your possession. How do you sleep with another woman without divorcing one of your wives and marrying her legally?" Maulana leaned on his door frame and said, "I do not have to marry Ikhlas because she is my slave girl and Jariya and has become the possession of my right hand." When Imam Maulana and Syed Saab exchanged those few sentences, the other 6 men who came as witnesses fell one after the other like pillars of snow that had melted when heavy rain fell on them. They couldn't believe their ears when they heard that their religious leader, the Imam of the largest mosque in their city, impregnated a girl and admitted that he did not marry her, but decided to have a child with her through adultery. Chapter 12. The Female Rebel Fighter. Olivia is a tall, smart, and exceptionally beautiful African girl. She is as beautiful as the Nile River. She is from the Alaz Andi tribe. She was born, raised, and lived most of her 19 years in Juba City, the capital of South Sudan. For the past 2 years, she has been traveling between Sudan and Kenya. She worked as a nurse in the city of Kopita and for a time as a correspondent for Human Rights Watch in South Sudan. She had a Sudanese Arab friend who served as a soldier in the government army. The fall of Kopita not only ended her job, but ended her love affair forever. Southern rebels killed her Arab lover during their attack on the city. Like the American groom Maluel, Olivia was forced against her will to join the rebel movement on that fateful day. She is sent into the jungle to train as a rebel soldier, and her medical career as a nurse is used to care for wounded rebels. Olivia did not enjoy her new mission and hoped that she could escape from the guerrilla war that the John Garang movement was waging against the Northern Army. She knew that she could not escape to a city still occupied by the government army, because if she were caught, she would be killed as a traitor or a spy for the rebel movement. If she is captured while trying to escape, the rebels will shoot and kill her as a traitorous southerner to her homeland, South Sudan. So like Maluel, Olivia becomes stuck in the woods. During her training, Nurse Olivia notices that Groom Maluel is somewhat different from the other rebels. He speaks politely, acts lovingly, and treats all his fellow soldiers with kindness. What attracted Olivia most to Maluel was his prominent level of education. Most of the rebels do not even know how to read and write while he is a university graduate. He can speak good Arabic and also speaks English fluently. It is Olivia's heart's desire to learn to speak Arabic properly. She speaks a broken Arabic known as Juba Arabic. Before her lover, the handsome Arab soldier, was killed, he had promised to marry her and take her to his city of Gadaref in the eastern region of Sudan. He said that he would not force her to abandon her Christian religion or ask her to convert to his Islamic religion. For this reason, he began teaching her his Arabic language and northern culture. Olivia loved her boyfriend so much that she could not see him as an enemy. Although his death brought a sad end to their love affair, Olivia still wanted to go north and learn the language and culture of the Arabs. Maluel discovered that Olivia shared a similar problem with his. When he trusted her, he revealed to her his desire to escape the Southern Revolutionary movement and search for his missing bride, the Dinka girl, Ayan Majok. Likewise, Olivia trusted Maluel and shared her tragedy and desire to escape with him. The two friends planned to escape during the rebel attack on the city of Torit. The attack is scheduled to occur at midnight. Half of the movement's forces were deployed on the outskirts of the city on the day of the attack. In comparison, Torit City has a stronger government base than Kopita City's base. Its fall would mean a great victory for the southern rebels and a crushing defeat for the northern army. This time, the movement's leaders changed their attack strategy. They decided to surround the city and force the Arab army to surrender. Therefore, the city became surrounded. The African commanders decided to send half of their forces at night to carry out the attack, and the other half would join them a few hours later. In this way, the leaders expected a crushing defeat for the government army. Regardless of the cost, the rebels decided to take the city that night. No rebel Southern soldier could retreat or escape. This order was issued under penalty of death. Female rebels were kept in the rear and orders were given to shoot any male rebels who tried to flee the battle or retreat. The two friends, Olivia and Malwal, decided to implement an escape plan during the attack. The 0 hour arrived at midnight. The government army responded with heavy fire on the attacking rebels. There were casualties among the first half of the rebels who tried to enter the city. Some of the rebels were forced to retreat. Great confusion occurred when some of the female rebels started shooting at their fellow soldiers. The first group of insurgents was crushed between the enemy and friendly fire. The commanders did not change their plan until sunrise and then ordered their soldiers to stop firing at their retreating fellow soldiers. By then, thousands of people had been killed. Most of the victims are unarmed civilians. At dawn, the government army fired smoke missiles into the air to prevent the rebels from seeing and identifying their targets. However, the battle continued until late in the evening the next day. The rebels were unable to control the city that day and were forced to withdraw under cover of night. Half of them were either killed or seriously injured. As the African rebels were withdrawing, Arab soldiers pursued them and killed many of them. During this confusion, the two friends Malwal and Olivia managed to escape from John Garen's movement. Chapter 13. Loyalty to the Oath of the Sacred Christian Marriage. The two friends, Malwal and Olivia, escaped when the northern government soldiers filled the air with thick white smoke to hide their base and soldiers from the southern rebels' artillery. They crept on their knees for a long time before they started running to escape. They then ran far into the forest before they felt safe and stopped to rest. The first thing they need to do is to shed their identity as rebels in the guerrilla fighting movement. They took off their military uniforms. They left nothing on their bodies except their underwear. They looked like Tarzan and Tarzana in the jungle without the fur of the lion and lioness. It is common to see males and females walking naked in the jungle of South Sudan. Some girls cover only the lower parts of their bodies and leave their chests and breasts open in the air. There is nothing shameful, disgraceful, or immoral for a female to walk in this way in the forest. So, Olivia is walking half-naked with only a little red underwear while Malwal is completely naked with his genitals visible as a little Banjas boy with no clothes on. Olivia has the hottest, sexiest body Malwal has ever seen. She has big bare buttocks and extremely high breasts like spears. Her breasts are completely visible, and he even sees their black nipples. With those fully exposed big tits and a big ass, she could seduce the holiest saint on earth. There is no place on earth more dangerous than the jungle in South Sudan. Malwal and Olivia now face great danger. They can be attacked and killed by wild beasts while they are roaming or sleeping at night inside the forest. To avoid such an attack, they decided that one must sleep and the other must guard him. They could not use the main road for fear that Northern Army soldiers or Southern rebels would spot them and shoot them from afar and kill them. Therefore, they have to walk among wild trees and in rugged and rough places. There is a high probability that a tsetse fly will bite them. No one knows that the tsetse fly has bitten him so that he sleeps forever. It puts its victim into eternal sleep and does not allow him to wake up again. Malwal and Olivia spent their first night in a burned-out village that had been destroyed and plundered by the Arab Janjaweed. Only lizards, rats, ants, flies, and cockroaches still live in this ruin. The destroyed village reminded Malwal of his village and his lost bride, the beautiful Dinka girl, Ayan. He still has some memories of his childhood in his old village. He tried hard to remember the innocent childhood days he spent with his girlfriend, Ayan. She is still a child in his troubled memory. Wherever he went, he remembered her innocent face. She was larger in size than other girls her age. When he last saw her, she was 5 years old. Whatever the case, her tall shape and large body made her appear twice as large as any child at this age. She is a dark brunette, but her skin, face, and eyes shine like the stars of the night. Her eyes are large and brown with beautiful whites surrounding them. She has a beautiful face and an exceptionally attractive body, even when she was a child in those childhood days. Those memories caused Malwell's tears to fall down his cheeks. Olivia understood the reason for those hot tears. She quietly walked towards Malwell and stood near him. Then she put her hands around him and pressed her body against his with an encouraging smile. Her large, perky, bare breasts pushed themselves against his back. This is the first time since they became friends that Olivia and Malwell are standing close to each other. Olivia's broken heart found great comfort in Malwell's friendship. Her beautiful face and friendly nature comforted his bleeding heart. During their military service in the jungle, they spent a lot of time talking to each other. When their soldier duties separated them for an abbreviated time, they always missed each other's company. One day, Olivia stayed up all night waiting for Malwell to return safely from a dangerous mission he had been sent with some rebels to carry out at a military base for the Northern Army. When her boyfriend returned safely, the girlfriend couldn't hide her joy. She ran and hugged him like a very dear friend. On that day, Malwell suspected that Olivia had begun to treat him as more than just a friend, but a lover of hers. Since then, he has been waiting for a chance to talk to her about her feelings for him. When she came here today in the ruined village in the middle of the forest and hugged him from behind, he found himself in a demanding situation. He is now in real trouble. He desired her sexually as she desired him, but his holy Christian marriage vow with his bride, Ayan, prevented him from moving forward. No matter what he thought of the marriage vow, he still couldn't resist or deny what Olivia wanted in such a lonely place in the woods. Therefore, he separated his mind from his body and allowed her to embrace him for a long time until she felt some sexual satisfaction from rubbing her half-naked body against his completely naked body until his penis was erect and about to insert it into her hairy pussy, but he resisted that and stood like a statue. Olivia had waited a long time and expected more, but the Christian groom, Malwell, had disappointed her. As if nothing had happened, she released his body and retreated into the shade of a distant tree. Olivia's body ignited a burning fire of lust in Malwell's heart because she had an attractive body. He realized that she loved him even though she knew he was married to another girl. Someone in Malwell's shoes might not hesitate to enjoy Olivia's sexy body. However, the heartbroken groom denied himself the opportunity and decided to remain faithful to his marriage vow to his lost bride, Ayan. While Olivia was sitting alone under the tree, her fellow soldier gathered up some broken boxes and wood and began building a beautiful hut for her. Olivia knew that Malwell wanted to heal the wound in her heart from his rejection of her. She tried hard to ignore him and continued in her grouchy mood until he had set up a beautiful nest for her to spend the night in. When he finished his work, he approached her and knelt beside her. "Look how dear you are to me. I have never built such a beautiful hut for any girl but you, and if you want to know how much I love you, I will carry you in my arms and take you to your beautiful nest." Olivia's beautiful eyes responded with a few tears of sadness and drops of joy. Her lips parted and a sweet smile appeared. "Do you really love me, or do you just want to be nice?" Olivia asked. "I will not deny the fact that I fell in love with you, but my Christian marriage vows with Ayan will not allow me to offer you more than the words of my heart." Olivia becomes amazed at the devotion of the groom, Malwell, to his missing bride, Ayan. She saw him as an angel sent by God from heaven to teach her marital fidelity in Christianity. Therefore, she couldn't resist the strong emotional force that compelled her to hug him again until their bodies were intertwined with each other. But they didn't go beyond being simply good friends who loved each other in a platonic, sex-free friendship. Chapter 14. The sexual complaint against the Imam of the Grand Mosque. In the meantime, before he impregnated his maid or his female slave outside the sanctity of marriage, the virtuous Imam Abdul Razak enjoyed spiritual and worldly authority and an indisputably good moral reputation in the city of El-Fasher. His followers worshipped him as a righteous man of God and a living Muslim saint and considered everything touched by his pure hands to become holy objects. Whenever their holy Imam finished the purification ritual during ablution, the worshippers would drink that dirty water as a blessing. Some of them loved to kiss his hands, others his feet, and others his sacred garments. Everyone believes that Maulana Abdul Razak inherited the blessing from his great-grandfather, Imam Muhammad Ahmad al-Mahdi, who expelled the British colonialists from Sudan. It is believed that this great-grandfather received a divine revelation from God to declare himself the awaited Mahdi of Allah who prophesied by the Prophet Muhammad to pave the way for the second return of Christ. Moreover, it is believed that this expected Mahdi is a descendant of Al-Hasan, the son of the great Islamic Imam Ali bin Abi Talib, who was the Prophet's cousin and son-in-law because he married his daughter Fatima al-Zahra, who did not menstruate in her life despite having children. Although many families in Sudan trace their lineage back to the Prophet of Islam, Maulana's family has an indisputable claim that the awaited Mahdi Allah was born in that blessed lineage. Therefore, the greatest imam of the largest mosque in the city of El-Fasher believes and publicly declares that he inherited the charisma of his great-grandfather, Muhammad Ahmad al-Mahdi. No matter how true or false this claim is, Maulana Abdul Razak is considered in the eyes of the people of Sudan to be a good hereditary saint. Accordingly, his family members considered themselves the only people suitable to rule the country religiously and politically as if they were the sons of kings. Therefore, in every election, the political party, the Ummah party of that blessed family, received the largest number of votes. To talk in detail about the religious and political claims of Imam al-Fadil's family would take volumes to write, thus distracting us from our story of the kidnapped Dinka bride. The most important thing that we must quickly mention is that the sex scandal has begun to cause some considerable damage to the reputation of the blessed Imam. When the 6 witnesses overcame the shocking news, they rushed home and broke the terrible news to their female counterparts. Their wives and daughters announced the scandal from the rooftops. The news hit people's ears like hot acid, and they did not rest until they conveyed it to 7 other families. The updated version of the sex scandal spread more quickly, traveling at the speed of light and becoming faster than the previous version. It spread to all cities and villages in Sudan, then crossed the border and spread into the country of Chad. However, no one was found who would dare to take any action against the adulterous Imam. Parents discussed the scandal in their homes, students in their schools, employees in their offices, workers in their workplaces, patients in hospitals, and prostitutes and sodomites in whorehouses and secret night bars. They discussed it in wedding homes and places of mourning. However, no one moved against the Imam of the city's largest mosque until the Haram baby was finally born. She is a forbidden female child. Her biological father, Maulana, named her after his late grandmother Sakina, who died a half-century ago. A person named Mr. Al-Dali, a political candidate and rival to Maulana's son-in-law, waited patiently until the sex scandal turned into flesh and blood. Mr. Al-Dali is a recognized lawyer and leader of a terrorist political party known as the Muslim Brotherhood. This is the only terrorist group approved by the ruling Sudanese government because the president of Sudan himself belongs to that horrific group. Mr. Al-Dali participated in his election campaign in the last elections but lost. Al-Sayed al-Saab, the son-in-law of the Imam who won the elections, was accused of fraud. The truth is that there in disguise, Mr. Saab made some women cast their votes twice. These women covered their faces with Islamic black niqabs and cast their votes thrice in various constituencies. Everyone knows this fact, but no one can prove it. The rival candidate, Mr. Al-Dali, objected to the election results and filed a complaint to the central government in the capital, and due to insufficient evidence, his claim was rejected. In this way, Mr. Al-Dali, a highly educated man, lost the elections, and Mr. Al-Saab, the illiterate, won in the last election competition. He has never gone to school in his life and therefore cannot read or write in any language. This ignorant and illiterate winner is none other than the difficult master, the son-in-law of the adulterous Imam. He was the one who dared to confront his father-in-law about the illegitimate child scandal. When the scandal broke, the loser in the elections, Mr. El-Dali, was away in the capital city. The shocking news reached his ears a few days before the birth of the forbidden child. He immediately traveled from Khartoum to El Fasher and hid in his residence until the sexual scandal became a human being, a bint haram baby girl. To secure his revenge, Mr. El-Dali hired some spies to monitor the adulterous imam's house so that the pregnant Dinka girl with her child in her womb would not be smuggled out and hidden somewhere. He also feared that the raped girl would be killed in an honor killing. He makes sure that when the law intervenes, the offender and his victim must be available for arrest. Being a recognized Sudanese lawyer, Mr. El-Dali filed the lawsuit personally and referred it to the Sharia court in El Fasher. He preferred the Sharia court because if Imam Maulana is proven guilty, which is likely to happen, he will be stoned to death for committing adultery with a young woman who is not his wife. He is a fortified Muslim man because he is married and has other wives. The Quran orders a married adulterer and adulterous woman to be stoned to death in a public place, and many believers must witness their punishment. The truth is that Maulana's case is unique, as it is believed that he committed this evil while he was a sheikh, an old man, the imam of a mosque, and a married man with 4 wives hanging on his ropes. There is a verse in the Quran that says, if an old man or aged woman commits adultery, stone them absolutely for what they have done. This verse was originally part of the Quran, but somehow it was deleted from the holy text of Islam. In a hadith narrated by Sahih al-Bukhari, the Prophet's beloved wife, Aisha, mentioned that the verse was on a sheet of paper under her bed, and one day a goat ate it. The Prophet Muhammad married his child bride, Aisha, at the age of 54. She was 6 years old, and he slept with her or began to rape her when she became 9 years old. No Muslim scholar, even today, can doubt the authenticity of that verse because it was mentioned in Sahih al-Bukhari, and al-Bukhari's collection of hadiths is considered by all Islamic scholars to be the most authentic book after God's book, the Holy Quran. Although this verse no longer exists today, its legal force still exists. Based on it, Muslims stone adulterers to this day. The Sudanese lawyer, Mr. El-Dali, also included in his lawsuit a complaint against slavery. Therefore, the blessed Imam is accused of practicing slavery and adultery in this era in which slavery has been abolished throughout the world. According to Sudan's civil law, no one has the right to enslave anyone. Mr. El-Dali realizes that Islam did not prohibit slavery in the past or present, but on the contrary, it has legalized it until today. However, the lawyer Mr. El-Dali thinks that Imam Abdul Razak will deceive himself if he tries to justify his adulterous act in court by referring to the Islamic legislation of slavery, considering the Dinka girl his slave and their right-hand possession, and therefore it is permissible for him to climb over her body and have intercourse with her without the bond of permissible Islamic marriage. As soon as the Sharia court received the legal complaint, it set a day for the session and invited the suspected Muslim man, who is the imam of the largest mosque in Western Sudan. The Kidnapped Bride. It is a love